Exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I am Thami Ngubeni.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
We begin here this afternoon with a look at Africa's growing influence on the global stage. That's opening doors to reimagine tourism, trade and innovation. The Africa Travel Indaba in Durban has various key voices in attendance. They unpacked how technology, policy reforms and regional collaboration could reshape Africa's tourism future. Our reporter, Lebohang Mabange, has more on this story.
As South Africa assumes a leading voice for the continent in global policy circles, Africa's tourism sector is being urged to take bold steps to innovate, integrate and invest in future-ready systems. Media entrepreneur and economist Zimasa Vabaza says artificial intelligence is no longer a concept for tomorrow. It is already shifting how people experience travel.
So when you look at AI, it's very practical. I'll give you a very simple example. The way that people used to plan their travel in the past was that they would start with a destination in mind and kind of figure it out. You're now able to ask artificial intelligence, based on what you like, what's the next destination I should go to? Based off experiences, budgets, availability, activities that I can do there. Artificial intelligence and how it is going to be tuned for the future is going to be the driver of where people go and why people travel.
But for Africa to benefit, Vabaza says local tourism businesses must recognize the power of content and storytelling in influencing travel decisions.
Content. People are going to be very important. Your little post at a lovely cafe or a coffee shop could go around the world and create almost a new economy for that little space. Now, tying those digitally is going to be very important, because how we package our content as South Africa and Africa is going to be how we are perceived. We now have an opportunity to reshape a lot of how the world sees us, and it starts with us and our little devices.
Still, infrastructure and accessibility remain some of the biggest obstacles. Air travel across the continent is expensive and limited, according to Jackie Mabuza, with years of experience in commercial aviation, who says the solution lies in removing the political red tape.
From an African perspective, open air skies is very important. And that remains a barrier in connecting Africa as a continent. So once we can get over those political hurdles and we have open skies where we can travel seamlessly in the continent, then that will help tourism.
Mabuza adds that while technology is empowering travelers to take control, the human connection still matters, especially in Africa.
One of the important things is the evolution of digital. I think Africans are becoming more digital savvy, so meaning that they have more control of their travel plans, of their travel desires, of their travel packages. But that is still underpinned with the fact that Africans, South Africans, in fact Africans in general, still want that human touch, which is a great thing from a job creation perspective and an employment creation perspective. So what I've seen in the few portfolios that I've headed up is that people will still take control of their travel online, but they still want to verify certain things with the human.
As Africa steps onto the global policy stage with a permanent seat at forums like the G20, the message is clear. The future of tourism on the continent must be digital, inclusive and connected, both by infrastructure and by vision. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebohang Mabange in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 12 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Mention was made there of the G20, and we move to exactly that. Now, aside from the group of 20, which is the G20 Employment Working Group meetings, there is the B20. Now, that is the official business working group of the G20. It's designed to amplify the voice of the private sector and also help develop policy recommendations for the world's largest economies. Dr. Anthony Costa, who is the head of Secretariat for B20 South Africa, says the business group of the G20 is not a South African or African process, but rather it is one that's rooted in the shared interests of the G20 nations, and that it provides a platform for global engagement. To talk to us about the B20 is none other than Dr. Anthony Costa, head of Secretariat for B20 South Africa, and he's based at Business Unity South Africa, or BUSA. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Costa. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Ngubeni. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. A very important point that you made, that the B20 is not localized in the sense that it's not about South Africa, and indeed it's actually not even about the African continent exclusively, but rather about the group of 20 companies. Talk to us about some of the highlights or key objectives of the B20 now that it is being held in, or rather that the G20 is being held in South Africa.
Thank you for the opportunity. The word you used, exclusively, is key to what we're trying to say. I'm speaking to you today from Abidjan, where I've been fortunate to participate in the African CEO Forum and participating in the Invest in South Africa panel yesterday. We try to explain how this is a process that South Africa is effectively curating, not for South Africa, but on behalf of South Africa, for the business across the G20 as a whole. We aim to give that an African perspective, to use it as a platform where South Africa can influence the process. We can make sure that Africa's concerns are heard and understood, but we can also do so in a way that's meaningful to business and the private sector from across the G20 as a whole, and hopefully use this as a forum where we can engage, find solutions, and present those solutions as very clear proposals to the G20 well in advance of the G20 summit later this year.
You mentioned that the B20 South Africa provides a platform for global engagement. How so? How do you ensure that all the voices of the G20 countries are actually represented and heard?
We have quite a structured process, and we're very fortunate in that Brazil, the previous chair of the B20, has been extremely helpful in terms of sharing their approach, and we've adopted a similar one, which in turn was adopted from India. We have some 8 task forces, each of which concentrates on a specific economic focus area and engages with respective G20 working groups. Each task force is chaired by a South African or African chief executive or chairperson, and they have co-chairs, about a dozen per task force, the majority of whom are not South African. So we try and make sure that amongst those co-chairs, we have representation from the different regions within the G20, from the rest of the African continent, Europe, Asia, North and South America, and that those perspectives are carried through into our work. And then finally, we have participation by task force members. We have about 200 per task force, and these are drawn from across the G20. And by G20, of course, we include the member countries of the European and African unions. And because it's a virtual process in the main, it allows people to participate from across the globe. And we try and make sure that we are also capturing local experiences as part of that process. So the mechanism is really structured in a way to ensure that the output is one that hopefully achieves broad consensus across business.
When you look at the countries that make up the G20, I mean, we're talking France, Canada, Argentina, Turkey, Italy, Russia, Japan, China, UK, US, Australia, Germany. So a number of countries from around the world. How important is the African agenda, and where does the African agenda fit in?
So South Africa has been the only African member of the G20 prior to last year, when the African Union was formally admitted as a member. And I think this really started to change the narrative within the G20. South Africa had an enormous responsibility to represent both itself and its own interests, but well as those of the broader continent. And now, of course, this is a shared responsibility given the direct participation of the AU, which is a powerful and representative forum. South Africa has also made it very clear in its G20 presidency that it sees this not just as a South African G20, but also as an African one. And we are trying to adopt a similar approach in the B20, where this is not purely a South African process, but rather one that we run, with Africa in mind as well. Of course, we don't aim to speak on behalf of the continent as a whole, but rather to provide a platform and a process that allows African business to ensure that its voice is heard.
You did mention, Dr. Costa, that you are at the Africa CEO Forum, and there you were part of a panel that looked at unlocking the African Continental Free Trade Area dividend through regional value chains as well as, PPPs or public-private partnerships. How is the business group of the G20 unlocking some of those opportunities presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area?
So the B20 is primarily a policy development group. We, of course, as business don't make policy, but we believe that the voice of business in the private sector is a very important one to advocate for policies that unlock economic growth. We focus on the topics that are relevant to the G20, and via the task forces I spoke about earlier, make sure that we develop actionable recommendations. So one of those clearly will relate to the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. We have a trade and investment task force, and it's focused on developing specific proposals to go to the G20. And of course, the G20 is not responsible for implementing the AFCFTA, but how actions and policies of the G20 can support Africa's implementation of this important initiative.
And as we conclude this afternoon, public-private partnerships we know have really been central to the future for South Africa as far as planning, monitoring and development is concerned. But could we perhaps just look at it beyond just South Africa? And if you could highlight for us how these public-private partnerships are kickstarting Africa's growth.
So South Africa is indeed a great example of public-private partnerships, especially in the field of renewable energy. I think we're starting to see opportunities in logistics as well. And what we'd like to do is share that experience and see what models we can derive, which can then be adapted and applied elsewhere in the continent and indeed elsewhere in the world. A key component of that, of course, is financing. Governments don't have the necessary resources to finance independently, so hence the private sector's participation. But especially in the rest of the continent, we also need the participation of development finance institutions. And so part of our recommendations is around how do we facilitate the participation of DFIs so that it's more impactful. We're looking at things such as local currency financing, the cost of capital, and unlocking financing, which of course in turn will lead to enhanced infrastructure investment through these public-private partnerships.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Anthony Costa, for that update. The B20, the official business group of the G20 meeting, and also highlighting some of the objectives that you are looking at. We thank you for your time and your input this afternoon.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Doctor. That's Dr. Anthony Costa. He's the head of Secretariat for B20 South Africa, based at Business Unity South Africa. They are the host organization, the BUSA, Business Unity South Africa. And they take us to 22 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Chanel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge et Bina l'export depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. information. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 23 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. This is Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Johannesburg, South Africa is playing host to the World Union of Wholesale Markets Conference, shining a global spotlight on the Joburg market, South Africa's largest fresh produce hub. Those behind the gathering says it seeks to showcase the market's pivotal role in agricultural trade and enhancing its global standing, as well as fostering collaboration with stakeholders from across the agricultural value chain. Joining us this afternoon as we focus on this is from Joburg Market, Hope Mabaso. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami. Good afternoon to your listeners and audiences.
Tell us more about the Joburg market, when it is that you were established, and what would you say is one of your biggest selling points?
The Joburg market is more than 130 years old. It's located in the center, just outside the city of Johannesburg, and it's owned by the municipality of Johannesburg. And it's a very unique market, which is almost like a trading center, which is almost like your stock markets, but which deals with food, particularly fresh produce within the agriculture industry.
I find it quite interesting. If I could, Hope, you mentioned that it's akin to the stock market. In what ways? If one is trying to visualize that, in what ways are they similar?
Yeah. Primarily, our buyers, our customers are people who buy in order to sell, especially the retail industry, as well as even the informal traders, and also big wholesalers from throughout this country, South Africa, as well as your SADC countries, your Mozambique, Zim, all the SADC countries. Basically, your bulk buyers come here and buy in trucks, and then they transport the fresh produce and sell them then to the local inhabitants in the different countries. So it's quite an international establishment, and its unique selling point is that people come to Joburg Market and discover the trade value of the agricultural products, because it's not one fixed price like in the retail industry. Prices fluctuate every day. They go up and they go down, and they are influenced by how the farmers harvest. If farmers have harvested in a big quantities, then the prices of fruits and vegetables goes down. But when there is scarcity,
no. So when there's scarcity as well, that will impact the prices. I think.
And then
that paints a perfect picture. It really is the stock market then of fresh produce. I can see why you would contextualize it that way. But let's look at the current global trade tensions that exist. In the light of that, how can local markets like your own strengthen regional supply chains in order to reduce dependency on global imports?
Well, look, our strength is that we are a local industry center, And as a hub, we encourage and prioritize local consumption, right? So our primary role is to ensure that there is food security in South Africa. But because our next door neighbors also trade a lot from South Africa because of the proximity with our borders and accessibility. So they also then depend mostly from South Africa and particularly our market. So we ensure that we have good relations in terms of both supply as well as the buying. Now we want to ensure that all our neighboring countries buy them at good low prices. This is why we encourage all farmers, even from those countries, to supply to our market as the Joburg market, because then we have a bigger chain of distribution, because we have buyers from all countries, Malawi, Mozambique, etc., on a daily basis. And so it's good that, yeah.
No, please go ahead, complete the sentence.
Yeah. So it makes for good food security and lessening poverty when, as an agriculture hub, we sell food which ensures the livelihood and health of all the citizens of our subcontinent, ensuring that there is no famine.
And I'm glad you yes. actually completed it, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you about, how it is that you are going to be maintaining competitiveness and also ensuring that there is food security. So that really just speaks to that. But what about the role of innovation? What about the role of technology in positioning African fresh produce markets as reliable as well as resilient trade partners globally?
You know, the Joburg market has a very dynamic innovation in that our trading system is online, and it's moving gradually towards an absolutely cashless system. But we still have streams of cash whereby we exchange the cash, but we are very online. And we call it a price discovery mechanism, whereby because prices are not static at one rate, this system benefits the farmers from all these countries, because unlike, when you in other industries such as the retail industry, our farmers get paid after supplying agriculture for after a month or even more. But if farmers and farming communities bring their produce to the Joburg market, they get paid in 48 hours electronically. And that is an innovation which is rare to find in any other country.
Great.
And the reason yes, and the reason why also why we are having a conference with international markets is because they also want to learn from this system how it works. Because in other first world, what they used to call first world countries, they use cash. We don't.
And
so they want to understand.
And also that's like a step ahead of what is usually a trend that is inverted. Usually we are the ones that are following those global trends, but now it looks like it's the other way around. Can you give us the dates?
Absolutely. Yeah, the conference is happening from the 14th until the 16th of May 2025.
All right, lovely. Thank you so much. And where exactly is it taking place?
Taking place at the Sentin Convention Center.
All right. So certainly I'm sure it will be a buzz with those within the agricultural sector from SADC and indeed perhaps the rest of the continent and the globe as well. We thank you very much, Hope Mabaso, for that.
No, it's a pleasure, Thami.
Thank you so much. That is Hope Mabaso from Joburg Market. It is going to be hosting the World Union of Wholesale Markets Conference and that really shines a global spotlight on the Joburg market. That's from the 14th to the 16th of May, taking place at the Sandton Convention Centre. It's exactly 4:32 Central African time. Shall we head over now to the economics desk, where Shanduko Ligege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. $1 is sitting at 18.30 in South Africa. In Botswana, 13 pula 34. Namibia, 80 Namibian dollars 30. The Zambian kwacha 26.48 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 305. Ethiopia, 133 birr 619. Uganda, 3,000 shilling 636. Tanzania, 2,000 shilling 689. $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 600. In Egypt, the dollar is at 50 Egyptian pound 43. Tunisia, 3 dinar 2. Algeria, 132 dinar 852. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 20. Angola, the dollar is at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is 2,850 to the US dollar. Commodities, gold is at $3,186, platinum at $984 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $66.25 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And standing by for the latest for the business of sport, a very good afternoon to you, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon from the sports desk. Now, FIFA is targeting $1 billion in revenue from the Women's World Cup, with global soccer governing body's president Gianni Infantino saying this on Tuesday at the Saudi Arabia US Investment Forum 2025 in the city of Riyadh. Now, the 2023 World Cup, co-hosted by Australia as well as New Zealand, broke even after generating more than $570 million in revenue. The next Women's World Cup is in 2027 and will be hosted by Brazil, making it the first edition to be held in South America. The USA is poised to also be named the host nation of the 2031 edition, which will be expanded to 48 teams from 32. Infantino also said there was a massive potential for football to generate more revenue outside of Europe.
And this is a very, very important message on what FIFA is doing for the development of the women's game, not just in a few countries, but literally all over the world.
On to this now. Real Madrid are set to appoint Xavi Alonso as the new head coach, and Bayer Leverkusen will receive between $5 and $10 million in compensation. That's according to German newspaper Bild. Now, the Spanish coach informed Leverkusen of his decision to leave earlier on this week after holding talks with executive director Fernando Caro as well as sporting director Simon Rolfs. Alonso made his decision clear on Wednesday and was also given the green light to make it public. This discussion will not only allowed Alonso to announce his departure ahead of Sunday's Bundesliga match against Borussia Dortmund, but also finalize key aspects of the deal, including financial terms. A release clause in Alonso's contract is understood to be worth between $5 and $10 million, and Los Blancos are prepared to activate that clause. A loan or transfer involving a young Real Madrid player joining Leverkusen has also not been ruled out. The Spaniard is expected to sign a 3-year contract with Real Madrid, while his salary will be close to $10 million per season, while at Leverkusen it was at $8 million a season. Everton have named Angus Kena as the new executive officer, with the appointment bringing over 20 years of leadership experience in football to the job. Now, Kena had been a CEO of Leeds United between 2017 and also held senior positions at Arsenal as well as West Ham United prior to his tenure at Eland Road. Now, Everton are moving from Goodison Park, the club's home since 1892, to a now 53,000 capacity stadium at Bramley Moor Dock. Everton's interim CEO Colin Chong will revert to the role of Chief Real Estate as well as Regeneration Officer, and will also oversee the development of Everton's new stadium, the regeneration of the surrounding area, as well as the future of Goodison Park. Now, the Texas-based Friedkin Group announced in September of last year that they had reached an agreement to buy Everton with a 98.8% takeover completed from Fahad Moshiri's Blue Haven Holdings, selling its majority stake in December of last year. And finally, in golf news, the world's best golfers will soon descend upon Quail Hollow Golf Club in Charlotte, North Carolina in the USA in search of glory. There are 156 players all contending for the crown that Xander Scheffler earned 12 months ago and the riches that come with it. So last year, an $18.5 million purse was available for prizes to be drawn from the champion. Scheffler bagged a cool $3.3 million following his 4 rounds of the course. Now, Rory McIlroy arrives at the PGA Championship set to play in his first major as Masters champion and Grand Slam winner at the course, where he has had more success and won more money than any other golfer. McIlroy won his first PGA event in 2010 at Quail Hollow, cashing in a $1.17 million check just days before his 21st birthday. Now, contrast that with last May, when McIlroy took home $3.6 million for winning the Wells Fargo Championship at Quail Hollow, which was also a signature event on the PGA Tour, with a $20 million purse. He won $1.486 million for his 2021 victory at Quail Hollow, and then $1.28 million in 2015. Earlier on the season, McIlroy also became the second golfer to surpass the $100 million mark in career prize money, joining Tiger Woods. His Masters victory was also good for him as he walked away with $4.2 million. Now, heading now into the PGA Championship, McIlroy's career earnings stands at $104.92 million. This year's purse will be revealed on later this week, but the 2024 tournament, of course, we spoke about earlier, handing over $18.5 million, including that $3.33 million Xander Scheffler, defending champion. Scheffler, who has never won at Quail Hollow, has earned $4.49 million in prize money at the venue, largely thanks to the high-paying second-place finishes in 2023 and 2024. So despite McIlroy's dominance at Quail Hollow during the PGA Tour events, he did finish tied for 22nd at the 2017 PGA Championship in Charlotte, earning a cool $90,000. That's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you would like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
Thank you very much to Mosibudi Makura. It's gone exactly 4:41 Central African time. May. And more specifically, the end of May is just around the corner. We're talking about the 29th of May. It certainly is going to be a very, very big day as the election of the next president for the African Development Bank will be taking place in Côte d'Ivoire at the annual meeting. And this afternoon, we have the pleasure and the privilege of speaking to one of the candidates who is in the running. And this is Dr. Samuel Maimbo. He is one of the 5 candidates running for the presidency of the African Development Bank. Now, he has an extensive CV. I'm looking at it right now. He's worked in development finance across Africa as well as the globe. Most recently, currently serving as the Vice President of Budget, Performance Review and Strategic Planning at the World Bank. Dr. Maimbo has been endorsed by SADC and COMESA. And for more on this, we're joined by the man himself, Dr. Samuel Munzele Maimbo, the Zambian candidate for the presidency of the African Development Bank. Good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for your time.
Are you looking forward more to the conversation or more to May the 29th, Doctor?
I'm looking forward to June 1, when all of this is behind us.
I like that. Your eye is on the future very, very clearly. So,
absolutely.
So, Doctor, what is it that inspired your candidacy for the presidency of the African Development Bank? And perhaps if you could put that in perspective for us, how has your experience at the World Bank also shaped your vision for the bank's future?
Well, to be candid, it's out of love for my continent and out of concern that I'm running in this race. Love for my continent, because we often spend too much time telling all of the negative stories about Africa. But the truth is, this continent is growing. It's vibrant. We have 16 countries growing at more than 6% per annum. We have a youthful population. You go to any city, whether it's Johannesburg, Cape Town, Lagos, this continent is active and vibrant. And I want to be part of that story. But I'm also concerned because despite the growth we have on the continent, we still have too many Africans who are being left behind. We have young people who are still looking for jobs. We have governments who know exactly what they want to do, struggling to find the financing that they need to finance the development for their people, especially many on the continent who are still struggling with debt. What I want to do is to use the experience that I have been privileged to have at the World Bank, whether it is in financing and raising significant amount of resources, whether it's in operations, 18 years of it, 7 years in Africa, to make sure that we're scaling up the size of our operations significantly. That's what I'm eager to get my hands on. Right now, to be honest, we have many wonderful projects on the continent. The challenge we have is they're too small to make a lasting difference. And that's exactly what I want to do at the African Development Bank. Increase the pace and scale of our operations so that we're making lasting impacts right across the continent.
You speak about the need for development financing or financing that will go towards development. But I wonder how much wastage there is within African governments, that when financing has been made available, development still is not the outcome of that financing. I know you're coming more from the economic and the financing sector of it, but how would you ensure a reduction in wastage?
But the truth of the matter is, look, even if we've plugged all of those holes, currently, we still wouldn't grow because we're not tackling the structural challenges we have on the continent. To give you a simple example of my own country, we're spending $300 million importing fuel from Saudi Arabia when Angola has fuel. Angola is importing $500 million worth of beef from Argentina when Namibia has beef. The reality is the trades between ourselves are not happening because we don't have the infrastructure in place. There is no pipeline between Angola and Zambia. There is no road infrastructure that would allow Namibia and Angola to trade to the volumes that they have. And as long as we're not trading with each other, then every year, as we have done over the last 10 years, we will continue to talk about the fact that Africa only contributes 3% of GDP in terms of global trade. And if we don't do anything now, by 2030, it will be at 2.7 because the rest of the continent, the rest of the world is growing faster than it is. So I'm alive to the importance of closing those leakages wherever they happen, committed to doing that. But I'm even more energized to make sure that we are having honest conversations on the continent and fixing the plumbing to make sure that we can actually trade with each other, that we can actually pick those sectors that are creating jobs for our young people. I love all of the movies coming out of South Africa, as I do Nigeria. And the movie industry is a good example where each film is creating 40 jobs of people from diverse backgrounds. But why only these two countries? We should be expanding this. And what I want to do at the African Development Bank is to make sure that we are picking those sectors that are creating more jobs than we currently are at the moment, And as much as it's an economic issue, like you rightly pointed out, you cannot separate it from what you rightly described as the public sector foundation upon which we must build our economies. So closing those gaps and making sure that we don't have more leakages than we have growth is absolutely essential. And I certainly intend to keep my eyes on both.
From your experience, is there indeed a political will to, for example, build that infrastructure? Why has it not been a priority of the governments of the continent to ensure that the Angola, for example, which you brought, is actually used for fuel, that Namibia is used for beef instead of other countries?
You know, over the last 9 months that I've been campaigning, and in particular the last 3 months where I've covered 27 countries, meeting various political leaders, meeting the private sector, meeting young people, I have been greatly encouraged that we have an opportunity today, by and large, of leaders who know what they need to do. I can tell you in Zambia, for example, we've been talking about how we expand the Lobito corridor to do much more than what that one project can do. So I'm not worried at this moment about the political appetite for meaningful, substantive, and sustainable change. What worries me today is the financial environment in which we find ourselves in, where global concessional financing is declining, where the traditional global value chains are being pulled back to home countries, where nationalism is on the rise. And it's in this environment which I want to make sure that the African Development Bank is using its voice to champion African causes, is using its finances to close those structural gaps that now we have the political leadership in place in many countries, not all, to actually get the job done. And then importantly, we're investing in our future by working with young people, because ultimately, I think they are much more brave, they are much more impatient than perhaps my own generation has been in addressing some of these structural issues. But your link to the political dimension of development is absolutely appropriate. And I think one of the reasons I was very keen to go to the African Union and meet the new chair is because I firmly believe that the African Union and the African Development Bank are two sides of the same coin. We have to address development as a political issue, as a mandate that we work together, because that's the reality, at least that I have found over the 30 years I've been in development. I very rarely have found the opportunity to work in best case scenarios where you tick the box on political commitment, you tick the box on financing, you tick the box on partnership. Those best case scenarios don't exist. I look for best fit, and I'm comfortable working with second or third best solutions as long as I'm getting the results I need on whatever issue I'm working on.
I'm really interested in your interest in the youth, and you mentioned that right now one of the things that you're planning and are championing is the African Development Bank Youth Council. How would this council actually function, and what impact do you hope it will have as far as the bank's programs are concerned, as well as the policies?
You know, frankly, this idea has come about because I'm so tired of going to countries, spending time with young people, listening to their vibrant business ideas, and then going to conferences where the average age is in the 60s and 70s. And then we talk about continental free trade, and then we talk about innovation. Our young people don't have the level of voice they deserve in determining the future of our country. So my idea is very simple. I just want to put in place an avenue where young people have direct contact with the leadership of the African Development Bank to hear what they're saying. And I'm pretty convinced that there will be many sectors where our job will be simply to provide them the space and get out of the way. I'm very excited that today there are many countries that provide workspaces for young people in tech to innovate, to try out different things, to meet other young people. What I want to make sure is that I have a young professionals program as well that makes sure that we are bringing into the African Development Bank 50 young professionals, half men, half women, making sure that they're being given global experiences. They're going to work in other MDBs. We're hosting young people from these institutions. We're mixing them up. We're challenging with we're giving them the opportunity to work on some of our complex challenges. whenever I have done this in my career, I've always been tremendously impressed because they have never failed to surpass my expectations of what would have been possible. That's the simple objective. I want to give them full access to what our programs are, how we've designed them, how we've thought about them. I want to make sure they're coming to the office and spending time. How exactly they are organized across the continent, I will leave that to the young people to self-organize, but it's something that I'm sure will work. The UN does this all the time with the UN model. I'm sure we can do this in development equally well.
Well, Dr. Samuel Mayumbo, wishing you all of the best. As you say, you're looking forward not to the 29th, but to the 1st of June. Thank you so much for joining.
There's a lot of work to be done.
In between, well, look, you've been traversing the continent. You've gone through, 27 countries already campaigning. Well, we wish you all of the best as you continue. But you already have the stamp of the likes of SADC and COMESA. So congratulations on that. And wishing you all the best for the road ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, and look forward to continuing this conversation one day with a young person right next to me.
Well, maybe on the 2nd of June, who knows?
Sounds good. You take care.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That's Dr. Samuel Munzele Mayumbo. He is the Zambian candidate for the presidency of the African Development Bank. It's on the 29th of May that we and the entire African continent will find out who the running candidate will be for that presidency. It's gone exactly 4:53 Central African time. In just a moment, we'll take a look at the markets.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
So for a look at the latest business and financial market developments, we're joined by Lindiwe Malchas, investment strategist at Absa Investments. Good to have you with us, Lindiwe. Very good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Thami, and glad to be on the show.
Thanks, Lindile. Let's take a look at how the markets have reacted to the US, China. They met over the weekend to discuss the tariffs. How are the markets looking on the back of that?
Yes, certainly. It has been a positive outcome from what markets were expecting. So going into the week, markets had expected a lowering within the tariffs around the 50 to 60% level. And ultimately, coming out of those discussions, what you have seen is that the tariffs have been lowered to around 30%, and there has been a 90-day pause that has been put. And we have seen that since the start of the week, markets did react quite positively to this. So U.S. markets starting the week on a positive note. Even from our local markets, we're seeing that are trading in the green. What hasn't done so well has been the resources counters. As you can imagine, gold has been driven a lot. A lot of its performance this year has been driven by the volatility, and then easing within those tensions did mean that the gold prices did drift lower, and as a result, our resources did struggle a bit. But overall, markets are trading higher this week so far.
And taking a look at South Africa now, specifically, Stats SA released the unemployment figures yesterday. What is your view on that? Not looking too good.
Yes, certainly it's never good when you see unemployment figures tick up. So it did come in around 32.9% in the first quarter. And this comes from a prior figure that had been lowering. So coming in at around 31.9%. And just to look at some of the trends within that figure, we are seeing where the biggest contributors was the trade sector. And there was a bit of seasonality trends coming out of the festive season, as well if you consider some of the school leavers that are now entering the job market. So adding on to that unemployed figure, and then also the construction sector that did record job losses, and that ultimately is negative because that sector does have the greatest job multiplier if you're looking at it from a job multiplier point of view. So not looking too good, and we do need to see some focus from the government in terms of addressing this and trying to make sure that we do have investment within sectors that can be able to absorb labor as well.
And maybe highlight some of those sectors that can be pinpointed to increase the rate of labor.
Yes, so construction is definitely one of them. We've seen that the multiplier effects within construction, where one job can create a potential of up to 3 jobs. So that's definitely one sector that can be looked at, and then other sectors that can be able to absorb. The other issue with the countries that we do have a high level of unskilled labor. So you do see sectors that are more labor intensive, such as the mining and manufacturing industries. Those also need further focus to ensure that there can be job creation as well.
And looking at the JSE listings, we're looking at Boxer. They're one of the newer listings on the JSE. They released their full year results. Perhaps for those who are not familiar with Boxer Limited, could you give us an outline of exactly who they are and what their results are looking like?
Yes, so Thami, Boxer Retail plays more in the food retailer space, but more in the discounted items. So they do not have a very extensive selection of items. They tend to be more focused and provide discounts to customers in that regard. They were formerly part of the Pick n Pay group, but we did see Pick n Pay listing the shares on the JSE. So the company is now a standalone listing with Pick n Pay still retaining some percentage of shares within the company. So we did see the results coming out this week. It is an impressive set of results, quite positive, seeing double-digit growth within revenue, and then earnings per share that did fall by double digits as well. But this was impacted by the listing of the company on the JSE. And then markets overall did react a bit negatively to the results initially on the day and the days following that. So markets certainly were demanding more from the company from a results point of view, but we are seeing that the company is still on their way to their growth ambitions, have promised to open new stores as well, both on the superstore side as well as some building stores and liquor stores as well. So quite a lot on the horizon for growth for this company as well.
Anything else that's quite impressive that stood out for you as far as the JSE is concerned?
Yes, so from the JSE now, what we are seeing that has been standing out and performing quite well so far has been the gold miners. But you are seeing as a result of some of the volatility that we saw and easing in the volatilities that they have declined a bit. But there are still some fundamental factors that still support the gold prices. And if we can maintain prices where they are now, you can expect an uptick in some of the gold miners as well. So those are some of the things that are standing out for us in that regard as well, as you see gold prices being supported over the last few years as well.
All right, Lindile Malchas, thank you very much for the latest business and the latest on the financial market developments. You have yourself a splendid evening further.
Thanks, Thami.
Thank you so much. That's Lindile Malchas, investment strategist at Absa Investment. He takes us to exactly 5 p.m. Central African time. That's how we wrap up Africa in Business for this afternoon. Standing by for Vue d'Afrique, here is Joël.
Un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel Africa de 15h à 16h, temps universel. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Démarrage de l'indemnisation des victimes du massacre du 28 septembre en Guinée. L'opération concerne 334 personnes pour un coût financier estimé à 120 milliards de francs guinéens. Un nouveau tournant dans la trajectoire politique au Mali avec la dissolution de tous les partis et organisations à caractère politique sur tout le territoire national. Et enfin, pour les grands titres d'aujourd'hui, en République démocratique du Congo, les opérations de bouclage dans la ville de Goma sous occupation de M23 AFC suscitent de vives inquiétudes. Bonjour à tous et merci de vous connecter sur notre site internet www.channelafrica.co.za pour suivre Vue d'Afrique, le magazine d'actualité africaine en langue française sur Channel Africa qui émet depuis Johannesburg en Afrique du Sud. Et Kato assure la mise en onde de cette édition. Et voici tout de suite le bulletin d'information que nous présente Joël Kabongo. Bonjour Kabongo.
Bonjour Joël.
SABC, actualité. La perspective africaine.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Le président sud-africain Cyril Ramaphosa devrait rencontrer le président américain Donald Trump dans les heures qui suivent. Une rencontre que beaucoup considèrent comme un moment charnière dans les relations tendues entre les États-Unis et l'Afrique du Sud. Cette annonce intervient dans un contexte de tensions renouvelées suite aux propos controversés de Trump à l'arrivée récente de demandeurs d'asile afrikaners blancs aux États-Unis. Trump a affirmé à plusieurs reprises que les agriculteurs afrikaners blancs étaient victimes des persécutions et des génocides en Afrique du Sud. Des allégations rejetées fermement par l'unité électorale du 9e congrès extraordinaire électif du PDCI réuni ce mercredi 14 mai a maintenu la candidature de Tidjane Thiam qui a démissionné le week-end dernier pour éviter que le tribunal mette le parti sous tutelle administrative. Pour anticiper sur une procédure judiciaire en cours dans laquelle la plaignante Valérie Apo soutenant que Thiam n'était pas ivoirien lors de son élection à la présidence du PSI, Tidjane Thiam avait préféré démissionner. La justice avait ordonné en avril la radiation du nom de Tidjane Thiam de la liste électorale indiquant qu'il avait perdu sa nationalité